Welcome, everyone, to the Divine Feminine Healers podcast. I have been so excited to have Katie Beecher, who is a medical intuitive and a licensed counselor, on the podcast today, sharing all of her wisdom. So, thank you, Katie, for being here.
Thank you.
So, a question that I ask all of my guests because I find it absolutely fascinating how each of us have this unique connection to the divine feminine and at different stages in our life. So, I'd love to hear what is your personal and current relationship with the divine feminine?
That's a really great question. Because it can mean so many different things to different people, you know? And I think that um, in my family growing up, I don't feel that the feminine or women in general were really respected.
Mm.
So um, there was always this fight to be seen and heard and just, not want to repeat the patterns that I had seen in not necessarily my mom's family, although she kind of took a subservient role to my dad a lot of the time. So I feel like I've just tried to be a strong woman, strong person in general. A lot of that means being a really supportive mom and supportive wife, and kind of just keeping in touch with creativity,
Mm.
with my intuitive process, and like gardening, nature, all that kind of stuff. We moved to a new house in Florida, so I'm really enjoying doing the gardening thing in a different climate than I'm used to
Mm.
from Connecticut. So yeah, I'd say all of those things, and also just letting things evolve and see where it takes me.
I love that. And I kind of want to extract this theme that you have, especially for your familial lineage. And I find this with a lot of healers is like we're really the karma breakers. It's like it's a very almost intense way of endings and beginnings that starts with our lineage. And I imagine, I mean, I see this with healers all the time. It's always about visibility, it's always about sharing our divine voice and our gifts and our skills. So I'd love to kind of hear from you, knowing that your story is kind of around visibility. When did you first start to develop and even understand that you had a gift as a medical intuitive?
I knew very, very early on that there's something different about me and that I had a presence, a voice, something that was always there that I listened to. Apparently, I had an imaginary friend when I
Mm.
was very young. So I feel like that was kind of the start of things. But I remember even at age 3 looking up at my parents, and they had a fight about eggs or something really stupid. And I heard this voice that said, these people are not capable of caring for you. You have to do this on your own.
Mm.
And that they would be there. They meaning I didn't know what it meant at the time, but these, guides, God, whatever you want to call it. And I just was always able to pick up on other people's feelings, know what people were thinking. I always knew when evil was present, and unfortunately, that was in a lot of my family members. So, always knew that, and just related to people differently. I always got along with older people
Mm.
better, pretty introverted, and the more I guess listened, the scarier it got actually, because I started to really pick up on a lot of evil and negativity
Mm.
around the age of like 9, 8, 9, 10. So it made me just turn away from anything that was there, but it also made me more interested in things like the occult and near death experiences and stuff. So I started reading more about that. And as I did that, I thought that I was picking up like evil entities, which I kind of sort of was, but I was actually picking up things from my own family
Mm.
and realizing that I knew I was very opposite of that, but I really felt like they were trying to get me and make me like them instead
Mm.
of me, being like, I knew I grew up to be some sort of a healer or something like that, like therapist in my mind at the time, but, forgot to show a lot more. And then I got an eating disorder, which was turned out to be one of the best gifts I ever had. And working with that person starting at the age of 16, she helped me connect to my intuition and appreciate my gifts and realize that I wasn't crazy, gave me someone to talk to. and that even though I had some of this evil presence around me, um, I was in control of it. I didn't have to be afraid of it. Like it
Mm.
can't attack you. It can't, get you without um, your cooperation. So I kind of learned all about that and realized that I needed to take my experience and teach other people that they could heal.
Yeah, I think that's so relatable because a lot of healers who are so sensitive when they first start to tune into that frequency, it's whatever frequency that we're at right now. So if your environment was projecting that negativity and those darker energies, it's like, okay, that's what I'm going to tune into because I'm sensitive to that and that's what I'm around all the time. And then, of course, that's your first experience of tapping into the unknown. So the first inclination is to say, oh gosh, maybe I'm a bad person for tuning into these bad spirits. And, there's so much, I think, majority, not everyone grows up like Catholic or Christian or some type of religious background who already puts out that spirituality as being like the devil's work, or like something crazy like that. So I've had definitely like a lot of healers in the past who've been like, I was so scared of my gifts because it felt like I was calling in evil, negative spirits, and I didn't want to be that type of person. And it kind of gets you on a path of like getting away from it. And I think that it feels like you're getting away from it, but it's really just that detour to getting back to yourself. And I very much, I see EDs, I've had my own too growing up, is very much trying to release all of that negative energy that you're having. It's like the body physically can't handle it anymore. And that's the only way, of course, there's that control aspect, but that's like really the only way that it can get out of it and start to get into the vibration that it's truly feeling where you feel at home in.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I thought I was crazy for thinking this, but I had a therapist I could talk to about it. And I really felt like these energies were trying to scare me, like their tool is fear, that they were trying to scare me into being the opposite of who I really was and being loving and caring. And I do believe in good and evil. I do believe, like I said, that we have control over that. But I honestly, like, I've met so many people and worked with so many clients who have felt like they had this really negative energy around them and it felt overpowering. They didn't know what to do with it. So when I talked about, hey, maybe it's actually trying to sort of convert you and make you different, like it makes a lot of sense.
Totally. It reminds me of the book The Law of One. I don't know if you've heard of it before, but it was like the channeled huge text that was channeled in the 80s. And it basically describes a lot of these like universal laws that we have. And it talks about there's these polarities in the world, right? And we see one as being like the light and one is seen kind of as the dark. And although we in our life, especially in Western culture, it's like black or white, and we like to see things as like polar opposites, but it's like we wouldn't be able to be the light if we didn't have the dark. Like it is serving a purpose, and a lot of
Yes.
times I constantly come back to it and I think like the people in my life who have brought that darkness, like I feel for them that they chose, like it's actually noble that they chose this role in this lifetime to play that darker energy in order still for everyone's evolution. Like it's still like it's kind of a weird way to describe it because that those people bring in a lot of pain and suffering, and you need
Sure.
boundaries with that, and you're not going to allow that to happen into your life and all that stuff, but they signed up for that as playing that role, and I really feel for them.
I agree. I agree. And I think we've all, I mean, I do believe in reincarnation. No one can actually prove it, but I do believe in it, and I think we've probably all been in that
Yes,
position too.
exactly.
And I think hopefully the more you stay here, the more evolved you get, the less you have to be in a painful,
Mm-hmm.
position. I like to think that anyway.
Yeah, same. That's, I mean, yeah, that's what I think too. Like, the more that you evolve in higher consciousness, at least that's like, especially I think the most painful relationships can be family so much because they're just so tied to it. And so when I think about some family members who are very young souls, like, that's just the best way that I could really look at it is like, wow, they're just so early on their journey. And maybe I
Cool.
agree. Like, I've always loved being around older people and elders. Like, since I was a kid, I just always attracted those type of people into my life just because I just love wisdom, and I think that their experience is just like out of control, like all the wisdom that they have behind it. And so when I think of some older family members even, but they have such young souls, and I'm like, okay, I had to have been there at some time in my life, and even though I feel like a very old soul right now, I know that our journeys are somehow reflections, and I can find some type of empathy and compassion with a loving distance if I need
It, sometimes a
to.
lot of distance. But yeah. I don't know what I would have done without my grandparents, my parents in my life when I was younger. I mean, I really don't. I don't know that I'd be here. So, I agree.
Did you have anyone in your family who had these intuitive gifts that were passed down from you?
Not that anyone talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so a lot of time I know in families they do, and the only time I ever heard anyone talk about it was actually my grandmother when my grandfather died, and I was actually there when he died at hospice, and I was the one who said, it's okay to go, which
Mm.
I never had that experience. It was just sort of an instinctual, like, he doesn't want to be here and he doesn't want to do it while my mom and my aunt are there. So it was time to go. Um, but I talked to my grandmother about that a couple of days later because I felt bad. I
Yeah.
felt like I had helped him die in some way, and that was a bad thing. But she said, "I'm so glad you were there." And she said, "That's why I didn't go that day because I knew he had already died.
Um,
Um, the night before, I saw him sitting in his chair, plain as day, and I knew that he had gone. And I was just like, that is the coolest thing because no one had ever
yeah.
talked about it. And to hear it just talked about in such a matter of fact way was so lovely.
Totally. I find that too with maybe they don't have the language that we have, but I get my intuitive gifts from my grandmother's side, and her dreams are just wild and insane, where her grandfather will come to her in her dreams and warn her anytime something's about to happen, like very
That's
clear
all.
messages. And it's so funny, they just talk about it like matter of fact, like, oh yeah, no big deal, like that's what this is. I'm like, no, but like that's like that's insane. Like let's open up this conversation. Like, what other intuitive gifts do you got in your arsenal? Like, I want to go like dive deep into it. And they're kind of like, like at a distance. But I think these gifts get turned off in certain lineages for a lot of different reasons, and we're here to reawaken them and to bring them back to life in our world, which is like so awesome. And I think what's so fascinating too about your journey is you are a certified counselor, but you're a medical intuitive, so it's very much about the physical body. So I would love to hear about that transition from counselor to medical intuitive.
Sure, yeah. So I got my master's right out of got my bachelor's degree. So I was pretty young. And even as a licensed counselor, I always worked really intuitively. So I just listened to my guides. I knew that when I kind of tuned out and just let the advice come, like that was when I was at my best. And I did know things about people's physical being. And I
Mm.
didn't really know how. I just was like, okay, I guess this is part of it because there's so much, mind body when it comes to psychology too. And then I didn't really know what to do with that piece of it. I didn't tell people that's what I was doing. Sometimes I did, but I started to accidentally channel people's loved ones during sessions, and that was really freaky. And but people knew, and they were fine with it. But I was just like, okay, I can't push this away no longer. I have to kind of use this. And then when it really came into play was my mom got very very sick, and so I became her caretaker. And she actually had a vaccine reaction and had a stroke and Guillain-Barré, which is like a known thing from a flu shot. And but she was paralyzed throughout 95% of her body and partially blind, so I had to really really tune in to
Wow.
be able to help her. And a lot of caretakers talk about things like that, so I was always interested in medicine. She was a nurse, and I was like, this experience really changed my life and I wanted to do something more. So I was doing art and counseling, and I just felt like I had a deeper there was deeper meaning, deeper calling somehow. And so I was looking through a Kripalu catalog, um, the workshop center, and saw something about a 3-day workshop on medical intuition. And I just thought, I don't know what that is, but I like the two words together. So took the workshop, and they didn't really teach us how to do it. It was more just, I'm going to give you a name and an age, tell me everything you can about animal, person, whatever. Didn't think I was going to be able to do it at all. And as it turned out, at the end of the first day, the person was like, I don't know what you actually do, but you should really look into doing this. So I just kind of was really blown away and
Wow.
realized that I had all these other gifts that I hadn't really been tapping into.
Wow, that's so awesome. I often think about the journey because we often think At least I do in this Western world, very linear. Like, okay, well, I chose the path of being a lawyer, so I'm just gonna be like this my whole life. And like, I put that template on me as a healer too. Like, I went into the world of Ayurveda, became an Ayurvedic practitioner, and like, oh, okay, like this is what I'm gonna be doing. And now I'm starting to see how that actually led the foundation for me as being more of like an intuitive healer, because Ayurveda is really just energetics and knowing like
Sure.
the elements with it, and taking it from less of like a physical standpoint and then going to that point. So it's so fascinating to me how that like trajectory really happens. And I'm curious, like now that you've tuned into people's bodies and their physical symptoms, do you notice common themes with certain ailments, like specific hormonal imbalances? Just because a lot of my community members usually suffer from female reproductive imbalances, and I know it's also so individualized to that person, but I'm wondering if there are common themes that show up.
Absolutely. And when I do my readings, I create a 4-page report and an intuitive painting, just knowing someone's name and age. So, but it taps into their whole life. So it's physical, emotional, and spiritual. So it's literally every single event, characteristic, relationship, trait, whatever, that is influencing their life at this point and never has before. So it's very
Wow.
broad. And I use the chakras as a framework,
Mm.
um, to make sure that I cover everything basically. And I absolutely do. One theme that I see kind of universally is that people who have very difficult experiences, the more that they fight their intuition, the more serious that disease or that symptom or that bad relationship has to be,
Mm.
in order to get them to pay attention and make
Mm.
changes in their life.
Wow.
Like it's a necessary thing. And I call it the feather in the sledgehammer, and we all do it. Like if you listen at first to when you're tired and you get a little rest, cool. But if you wait and wait and wait, you really may get very, very sick or may get into an accident or something because you've been ignoring. So it's, not necessarily rocket science, but it happens at a very deep cellular unconscious level. And I do notice things like if people have hormonal issues, infertility, issues around like hips, reproductive area, that kind of stuff. It's not uncommon for them to have dealt with some sort of sexual abuse or a um, kind of a not respecting of the feminine, if you will, growing up in families that are misogynistic and things like that.
Totally.
Um, Issues with the throat or the thyroid, it's not uncommon for people to not really feel comfortable expressing themselves or not be able to feel what they feel or, identify feelings. So there's so many themes, and that's kind of what I wrote my book about too, is like looking at all those themes and the root
Mm.
causes and trying to put them all together because they're all connected.
Mm. Wow, I love all of that so much. Yeah, that's what I found. I'm so fascinated with the sacral and the throat chakra connection. Like, I'm sure you've heard, like, it's the downward triangle of the yoni, and then also the thyroid, it's the same shape. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, and maybe that's just because of my community and like what I'm seeing from my own experiences, which are mirrored in my clients' experiences, but it
Sure.
very much is reflected of like this creative energy and this intuition that lives in the womb that we've been shown in experiences to deny, to show that it's not
Yeah.
valuable, and then but we are here to not only tune into our own, but also step into the gift of sharing that voice with the world, whether that is starting our own business or just using our healing capabilities for other people, is like definitely the journey for it. And there's so many layers to it. And I love that you say like the physical body has to scream so loud in order for them to notice. And I also find that with a lot of healers, like a lot of healers get Lyme or they get these very chronic conditions that are literally debilitating, because it's like like this isn't the life you were supposed to be in. Like we're just trying to get you to go in the other direction, to let you know that you were meant to live life in a very, very different way.
My eating disorder. I mean, perfect example. Absolutely perfect example. I had Lyme too. I've recovered thankfully. I have something called Ehlers-Danlos, which is a connective tissue disorder that it's really, really common, but it's really undiagnosed or misdiagnosed.
Mm.
And I feel like I am a guinea pig for my clients. And
Mm-hmm.
I, find these things out for myself, go through the healing process or whatever. And then it's like, oh, guess what? You're gonna, all these people are gonna come into your path who has these things,
Yeah,
and I just kind of been like, okay, just help me recover.
for
That's what
sure.
people, use me as you will. So
Totally. That's totally been my journey. I had amenorrhea and I still suffer from it. That's kind of been my whole journey since I was a teen and, got my
Mhm.
period really late. It's always been difficult to get it regularly. And that's how kind of how I found Ayurveda, and I was able to get it back after actually my Reiki 2 attunement. Like the next day, I got my period again. So like energy healing has definitely been like such a huge part of my journey.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to see the connection between physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual because I've done so much mental and emotional healing within the past couple of years, and even just this year, been a lot of even exploring sexual abuse and misogyny that I've experienced in my life, and like dead on with how that has related to my sacral chakra issues. And it's so interesting that it really does take each piece of that because the most recent message that I got earlier this year was to start incorporating meat back into my diet. And I have been completely plant-based, and it's very interesting how that has also helped my hormones come back online. So I'm kind of curious to hear like your perspective, maybe not on this specific subject of introducing meat for hormonal health, but how bringing in physicalities like diet has their own energetics behind it.
So I'm very respectful of people's preferences, and what works for them, and I'm very careful not to make judgments. I'm sure you're the same. I've learned for me and for a lot of my clients that introducing meat when you had been plant-based was very helpful for things like hormones or mood because of the amino acids. It's
Mm-hmm.
tough to do vegan well and get enough complete proteins, for example, you
Totally.
know, or iron or
Mm-hmm.
all the things. And I think as a society we tend to be lazy, and it's a lot of work. And I just been reading more about the weird little things that are in animal products that are super hard to get from
Same,
non-animal products,
same.
you know so it's yeah, and I tend to crave that kind of stuff anyway. So and I'm not in love with the concept of restricting,
Mm-hmm.
um, partly for my eating disorder background, but also because a lot of people get sick and then they feel like they can't eat this and they can't eat that and they can't do this and they can't do that. And then it robs them of a quality of life too. Like I get if you react to things, I react to things, I get it. There's things I avoid, you know, but I think already feeling kind of yucky and like you're not enjoying life and then feeling like you have to restrict when you may or may not need to,
Totally.
it's a whole other thing. But in nutrition, especially things like the conditions under which the plants and animals were raised, the energy of them. um, you probably know about, there's a really cool book about water, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but different energy was infused into different containers of water, and then they did something with them. But it's like it's the coolest thing ever. But it
Yeah.
really makes you think about you know the energy of the people who have the farm or who are raising the crops, or were those animals happy, or I just it sometimes it hurts my head. Like it just is mind blowing, and I think it gets into quantum physics too because the energy is all connected. But yeah, I love what you're saying about that, and I think the more we know, the better. And for me, it really gets down to listening to your body. I always tell people it's very hard to tell whether you're sensitive to things by testing,
Mm.
and it's not always accurate, or they don't test enough things or enough percentages. But kind of when you want something, pick it up and hold it. Does it still feel good to you? Is this what you want? Listen to that piece. And then the next piece is take a bite and actually chew it. Chew it slowly and actually taste your food. Wow, what a concept. If it doesn't taste good, spit it out. We don't do that. We just kind of mind I was going to say mindful, mindlessly eat and not think about it, and then do it again the same way. And then maybe 15 minutes later, check in. Do
Mm-hmm.
you have more energy? Are you tired? Do you have a stuffy nose? What's your stomach doing? So you get the messages from your
Yeah.
body and your emotions.
It's
And I think
so
that's a help.
it's so important because, so using me as like an example here, I had created such strong beliefs. I mean, it was 10 years I didn't eat meat, such strong, potent beliefs that I wasn't going to create the energetics and the harm in the whole meat industry. I'd taken full responsibility for that. And so I just like made that commitment that I was just dramatically going
Sure.
to give up like all animal products. And so I truly never believed that, but the belief was so strong that I couldn't even see that my body was craving it
Yeah.
until a really strong way that I get messages is through my dreams. As I mentioned with my grandmother, it's a gift she passed down for me. And I would dream of salmon. Like as soon as I started dreaming of salmon, I was like, okay, this has gone too far. Like obviously my body's craving this. I'm just gonna eat salmon. Felt amazing. Same thing happened with chicken. And
Right.
like my body was just craving it. And I'll never forget like the first bite that I had of chicken and my body just felt so happy and like alive and grounded again. Like grounded in a way that I never had been in so long. And knowing the energetics of meat and Ayurveda, it's earth and water, which it gets us back into our body. And, you know, a lot of healers, especially intuitives, like we're always channeling and we're always in the upper chakras.
Oh my gosh.
Love to be in the astral realm. Like if I could, I would just be there all day, all every day.
Mhm.
But you know that's also a trauma response in a lot of ways, and I think that eating meat really connected me back to my body again to be like you're grounded. And yeah, there's so much too around the amino acids. Like I've been diving into all the science behind it and how it's actually even more beneficial for women than men to be eating protein
Yeah.
and building up their hormones again. And that restriction makes so much sense because we get in our heads of, I work with a lot of perfectionists, you know, people who have a lot of fiery energy and they think in their minds, this isn't for me. I'm like, I'm going to be the best, purest healer ever, which means I'm going to be plant based. I'm going to meditate for 3 hours a day, like doing all these things in my life. And then it was, there was one point in my life, like I couldn't get out of bed. I was so exhausted and I knew it wasn't like physical ailments anymore, but I just had no joy in my life. I was like, I took all the joy out because there was so much restriction on what I thought I had to be and I had to do. And when you really remove that and just tune into like what your physical body wants, like it's kind of crazy what pops up. So I also recently talked about this on my podcast, and by no means am I and like a promoter for alcohol, and I think there's way more less benefits to it than ever. But like I gave up alcohol because I thought like that's what it means to be like a pure healer. And by no means am I drinking like every weekend or anything, but to have something like that that's on occasion that makes me feel like a human again, it makes me feel like I don't have to put on this facade. Like who knows, maybe I'll give it up again like forever. I truly love that time in my life. But we just put all these like ourselves in boxes and restrictions, and that we're meant to be human. Like we're meant to enjoy life, and whether it's eating meat or not, or drinking alcohol or not, it's really up to each person.
It's so true. And I really like what you said because I think it's about a balance of being aware of your stuff and, not just talking the talk, but also walking the walk. So I always think about, is this advice or that comes down from my guides, but is what I'm representing and
Mm,
telling clients like, am I aware of my stuff? Am I taking
mm,
care of it to the best of my ability? Am I doing what I need to do to take care of myself, and not in a perfectionism way because I am so not perfect,
yeah.
not anywhere close. I'm learning, but I think that so allowing yourself, to be imperfect, but also being like, I also have to be honest about my issues. And am I taking care of myself? And am I treating people the way I want to be treated? And am I being authentic? And, all the things. So I think it's, and if we work with humans, which we all do, you know, um, I love what you said.
Mm, thank you. Yeah, so I kind of want to hear a little bit more about like your style of healing. I love healers so much, and like everyone's readings are like so unique. So I'd love to hear like what are your gifts and what does a typical reading look like with you?
Sure. So it's evolved certainly since I first started whatever this is, and basically knowing someone's name and age. I try to know as little as possible about the person because my humanness can get involved and make wrong assumptions. The more I know, if I'm doing a reading on somebody I already know, I have to kind of put that aside and go deeper. So,
Totally.
so there's that. But I create the 4-page report. It's very, very detailed. There's, I don't know, probably over 75 bits of information um, in just the report. And then I also create an intuitive soul painting. And those are different for each person. They might be a plant or an animal or a figure or whatever comes to me. But it's a kind of like dreams. It's an unconscious and symbolic way of getting more information about people. And when I do the report, well, when I do it all, I've been doing this for a long time. I just figured out it's like 37 years the other day. I'm like, oh my God.
Whoa.
Right? I know. Since I got my counseling degree and started doing art therapy and all the things. So I feel really old. But so I am able to see pictures of things in my head, see words, hear words, kind of see um, inside of people's bodies, see, kind of scenes from their life, if you will, feel things physically, kind of all of it, which is neat. I'm also a medium, so I get information from people who passed too. And I use all of that to find out things like, first I start out with just kind of what are your what are things about you in
Mm.
general with your life, and that shows that I'm actually connecting with you. So it's kind of like this proof that I can't BS because I send the report and painting before I meet with people.
Mm.
And so we go over the report, kind of, is this resonating with you, and like what are we learning and what can you do about your issues and things. And then the painting part is kind of my favorite because it's like the colors all mean something different and not necessarily corresponding to chakras. The placement of things matter. Like, for example, one of my signs that someone is feeling very responsible for others or had a lot of pressure on them is very broad shoulders.
Mm.
So I kind of have this language that
Yeah.
I use. Um, and if somebody has had early trauma, I will often get like 3 red dots near the root chakra and just different kinds of things. But I purposely don't interpret them until I'm, with the person. And it both gives me confirmational information of what I have in the report and also different information because sometimes things are hard to express in words,
Totally.
especially I don't, I'm very careful about what I write. I'm not going to write, um, you know, sexual abuse and things because you don't know who's getting the report. You don't want to shock people. So to be able to express that symbolically is much more gentle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I also, there are people who do this work who work differently, but it's illegal and unethical to diagnose. I'm not a lab test. I'm not a doctor or anything like that. So I will point out symptoms. I will say things like symptoms similar to Ehlers-Danlos or symptoms similar to Lyme or something like that. And then people confirm it, or sometimes they don't know what they have. And then I have medical professionals that I refer to, almost all of whom are natural practitioners in some way. I'm not always, but and then people go to them for confirmation, for a diagnosis, for different types of advice and treatment. But there's a lot of stuff that I work with people on as well.
Mm. That is so awesome. I love the creative art that you do. I feel like bringing in creativity and art into the healing sciences is truly the future of it, because I think that oftentimes we kind of miss that femininity with it,
Mhm.
and that kind of like flowiness to it. So I love that you bring that into that. And it also kind of like, to me, that's like kind of seeing their aura, and like maybe there's like a power animal in there that can give them
For
like really
sure.
good meaning, or
Animals come up
yeah,
often. Yep, yep.
I love that. I feel like that's really special. And when you're talking about, to me, I mean, obviously I'm into spirituality, and but like when I first started my healing journey and I went to an internist for my digestive issues and I was going to my OBGYN for my mental issues, and you could spend years and years testing, getting all these different answers, and it's so complicated. And then what are you really seeking here? Like, yes, you want your body to heal, but what does your soul really want? It wants to connect to the spiritual meaning behind what is happening with all of this. That's really what I want, right? So going to a medical intuitive first can be so healing in that way, because you get the confirmation of, this isn't just about healing my physical body. Yes, I need to do that, but it's redirecting me on that path, and it can get you in alignment there, because you're never going to heal unless you have made those changes in your environment and in your life.
Oh my God, it's so true. And that's why I love the concept of the report being so complete, because people will come to me for, I don't know, abdominal pain or something. Just going to throw something out. And then my guides in the report reveal, like, oh, you have this really difficult relationship, or you have
Mm,
no boundaries, or you're giving too much of yourself, or whatever it is. And people do not relate the two. They don't
yeah.
relate any of that stuff. So, and then when we talk about it, it's really hard because their intuition has been saying to them, hey, you got to get out of this relationship, or these people are using you, or you need to stand up for yourself. And that's so terrifying in so many ways. So it gets pushed down. And people say, well, when I feel better,
Mm.
I'll leave. Or when I feel better. And I'm like, yeah, no. Talk about all of this together, help you take steps towards all of these things, because you cannot heal in
Right.
an abusive relationship, or when you're unhappy, or when you're in a career that you hate, or, you know, you have to look at all of it. And most people get it to a certain extent. There's a lot of resistance because it's hard. It's really, really hard. Um, but there's just no other way.
Totally. Like I've even noticed this with physical injuries, how I've seen certain people have the same injury, like in the root chakra with the foot, and not realizing because it looks like it's an accident and it looks like why does this keep happening to me? And physically we can say maybe the ankle didn't strengthen enough and you know blah blah blah. But if you are not grounded, if you're afraid to take that next step forward in life, you're going to be more sensitive to these challenges that are coming your way.
Also, it's interesting. A lot of I've found, and I've kind of read about this too, but I found that a lot of healers tend to put weight on very easily, or have trouble
Yes.
taking it off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because we spend a lot of time on the other side, like you were talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not grounded, and we need to be on the other side, but we need to live in the present too, and
Yes.
to be here. So that weight physically, because of gravity, pushes you down closer to the earth.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've noticed that too, and I've talked to a bunch of healers. That's definitely been my journey. The past couple of years, I just was like, I don't know what to do. Like I just felt so heavy, and I felt stuck a lot of the times, and I knew my body was just trying to keep me grounded in earth. And then I think there was also, you know, there's a part to it too, like where you're putting on weight. For me, it was also like in the abdominals. So like I was really trying to create a barrier and a boundary between me
Protective.
and people. And like I was in a past business partnership before, and like again, like no qualms with that person, is such a beautiful person, but it was just showing that I needed to be like on my own, you know.
Sure.
And it's just so wild how that all happens.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fascinating. Absolutely, like, yeah. I mean, I've had there's a weird story in my book about my this pain that I had for a year. Could not explain it, but we were going through so much stress and it was crazy. And I stopped doing work on myself and all these, you know, horrible things, terrified, anxiety, and had this abdominal pain. Couldn't get rid of it for a year. All these tests, test after test after test after test, you know. And finally, I was just like, take my uterus out. I can't. We knew there was something, but we didn't know it. Um, and when we got out of surgery, my doctor's like, okay, so this is really weird, but your fallopian tube was wrapped around your uterus. So we had to take one of your ovaries. And I said, oh, I know exactly what that is. She's looking at me like, we could gotten to know each other pretty well by then. She's like, okay. And I said, I stopped painting. I stopped the activity that I had been doing almost every day. You know, I stopped the creativity. Creativity is I mean, your uterus is the center of creativity. My body was like, fine, you're going to cut yourself off. So we're going to symbolically cut you off to
Wow.
get your freaking attention.
Wow. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you can't make this up.
You really?
It's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering if you pick up on, I know you do personalized one-on-one readings, but do you ever pick up collective messages? Maybe something that's a common thing that's been coming up in your community recently, or if you just tune in and any messages that you've channeled recently.
Yeah. So one of the things I think is absolutely wonderful is the younger generation of people, and that can mean a lot of things, but that they are so much more spiritually in tune and so much less willing to buy into just garbage and everybody has to be the same and everybody doing things the same way, and the authoritarian stuff, and even traditional education systems where you have to
Mm.
sit down and shut up and listen, and um, and they're so much more willing to speak up, to be different, to be more loving and understanding of those who are different from them as well.
Mm.
I feel like they're just, and that's, it's interesting, like neurodivergence, for example. I think there's a lot more people who are talking about being neurodivergent, to the point where maybe neurodivergence normal, and the
Right.
people who aren't aren't like, I hate the word normal, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like it's more common,
Totally.
maybe, and maybe we're all supposed to be different and think differently, and
Mm.
that's really lovely and healthy. So I've been hearing that for a long time, that to really, like, my children have always been our greatest teachers.
Mm.
So to, learn from them about just being respectful of other people, and differences, and love and tolerance, and speaking up, you know, saying what's on your mind, being authentic, and those kind of things. So I'm hoping, and I feel like that is really the trend.
Yeah, I feel that too. I mean, it's hard to tell just because, again, like I feel like I'm in this space and I'm in this
Sure.
community a lot. But the questioning, and I think about that too about neurodivergent kids and people who are experiencing that. I'm like, there's such a sensitivity and there's such a genuine like quality. And for us to put our projection of like how we think life should be and how you should be living your life is like so restrictive. Like, I truly believe those people are like living in a very like expansive and joyful way, that they have also like a lot of gifts and sensitivities that like need to be expressed, and our world just, as a collective hasn't gotten to that level to really understand it.
I agree. I absolutely do agree. So
Mm.
yeah, and like I said, my kids are, well, they're kids. They're 31 and 25. So yeah, but they've always from a young age been really old souls,
Hmm.
really, not afraid to express their opinion. We also encourage that, because we were raised differently, breaking the cycle.
Yeah.
Uh, but they always had really fun, interesting friends who are different, still do, and we just really, really enjoy them. Very creative people, and
Mm.
so yeah, it's awesome.
I love that. Ending on a hopeful note too. And I recently just had on the podcast a spirit baby healer, and she was talking to me a lot that a lot with fertility. It's, these babies are coming in, they're indigo children, they're very from a higher vibration, and that's why it's taking a longer process, so that we as adults can really hold the space for this new generation of people and thinkers, which is exciting. I like that there's like a lot of different systems like human design that says this, like, oh, in 2027 there's gonna be this shift. Like, I don't think it's gonna be the next day, but I think we're in that
Right.
process of like moving towards it. And Vedic astrology, which is what I follow, it's saying a very similar things too. So it's cool to be a part of that. I often like question and think like, has it always been this way? Like, are we just like thinking that it's us because like we're in it right now? But I like to think that we really are moving in a new way.
I really do think so, and I've got a few years on you, so I really feel like the people that I was raised by, my grandparents not included, were very fear based,
Yeah.
and everybody had to be a certain way, and no one could be authentic or really share
Mm.
feelings. It was just talking behind people's backs, and then
Yes.
so much judgment, but no
Yes.
insight. So,
Totally.
I really feel like things, at least in some circles, hopefully a lot, are changing.
Yeah, I love that you come back to your authentic self. That's always been part of my mission, and I think that's true. Like, if you, a lot of us, that's just like how a lot of families bond, is through gossip, is through talking people's behind people back and trying to come off like a certain way. Like, I know a lot of older generations feel that like it's so much of like what your white picket fence and grass looks like, and it's so frustrating because then it's like, but who am I as a human in this authentic light that I'm sharing? And that's truly why we want to be seen and visible. Like that's at the heart of it. So I really love that sentiment.
And I knew that that was one of my things when I was very, very little. I'd be over my other grandmother's house, and this big family, someone would leave, and everybody else there would start talking about
Mm.
them, like totally shit talking them. And as a little kid, I was like, this is not family. This is
Yeah.
not okay. So I always knew that I needed to do things differently.
Yeah, totally. That intuition was always there. Well, it has been so fun having this conversation, Katie. I'm so happy that I had you on, and I'd love for you to share. I'll have all this linked in the show notes, but share where our community can find you and how they can work with your lovely one-on-ones.
Yes, certainly. So the easiest place is my website. It's Katie Beecher, BEE, katiebeecher.com. And I'm on, Instagram and Facebooks and all those kind of things. You can get to it all from there, my book from there, and all the things. So, but I've really, really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And I follow her on Instagram and I love it. She gives lots of spiritual insights for certain ailments that are coming up too. So definitely give her a follow. I'll have that linked in the show notes. And I just hope you have a great day. I love talking with healers. I could tell when someone's really in tune because it just feels like very light energy and like almost like a high after. So thank you very
I
much. I'll be
agree.
riding very high after today.
I agree. I really appreciate it.
Yay. Thank you everyone for listening. I will see and listen to you next time on the podcast. Bye.